Hey folks, we're the hosts of Comic Sans, the podcast about comics for those who are sans knowledge.
Comic Sans is a show for people who are new to comics, like me.
Or people who love them, like me. You can listen to our brand new third season or binge the first two right now,
wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, this is Rob Benedict.
And I am Richard Spate. We were both on a little show you might know called Supernatural.
It had a pretty good run, 15 seasons, 327 episodes.
And though we have seen, of course, every episode many times, we figured, hey, now that we're wrapped, let's watch it all again.
And we can't do that alone. So we're inviting the cast and crew that made the show along for the ride. We've got writers, producers, composers, directors, and we'll of course have some actors on as well, including some certain guys that played some certain pretty iconic brothers.
It was kind of a little bit of a left field choice in the best way possible.
The note from Kripke was, he's great, we love him, but we're looking for like a really intelligent Duchovny type.
With 15 seasons to explore, it's going to be the road trip of several lifetimes. So please join us and subscribe to Supernatural Then and Now.
Hey everyone, Krupa here. A couple of weeks ago we had Colin Trevorrow on the podcast talking about his latest indie movie, Jurassic World. You might have seen it. Now the movie's out, we thought we'd run the whole uncut hour-long interview, spoilers and all. Don't worry, the regular podcast will still come out this Friday as normal. I've got nothing else left to say. Love you. Hello, welcome to IGN. I'm Daniel, and I'm joined by Colin Trevorrow, director of Safety Not Guaranteed, and this little movie.
It's a little film we
Jurassic World. So I was really worried about this interview because I've interviewed people before when I haven't quite liked their movie, and I've kind of weaved my way out of it. And I'm a huge Jurassic Park fan. If people listen to the podcast or watch IGN, they know I'm a huge Jurassic Park fan. Like, I was 7 years old when the original movie came out. I watched it on an island, the island of Jersey in the British Channel. And I just it is the formative cinema going experience of my life. It's probably why I'm kind of doing this job, which is really weird to be interviewing about this movie. And, you know, lots of people say it, of my generation, that is their Star Wars, which is hyperbolic because it hasn't had the lasting cultural impact. But there's something really special about Jurassic Park. Mm-hmm. Now, you saw it a little bit later in life. Can you talk about when you first saw it and what it kind of meant to you, like your first experience of it?
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. I have had many people tell me that it was their Star Wars, and I think regardless of what the actual resonance is culturally over a long period of time, it's a very personal thing, what that movie was for you that made you maybe not decide you had to be a filmmaker, but that you wanted to surround yourself with this new mythology that Steven Spielberg and George Lucas and Robert Zemeckis and all these people who were working during that particular period of time managed to introduce it, that have lasted for so long. And Star Wars was my Star Wars. I'm older than you. I'm 38 and not that much older, but 5 to 7 years can make all the difference when you're talking about which part of the 80s hit you.
And where you are in your life. Exactly, I was 7 years old. I was really into dinosaurs. You were probably into girls.
I was into girls. That's exactly right. I was 16. I was very much into women in movies and food. I'm not sure which that. I know Scorsese always said religion, movies, and I can't remember. Maybe food was his third thing, or family.
The Trinity.
They're much the Trinity, much more legit. Minus women, food, and movies, but with all women, like relationships and respecting women, not of course. But I was sort of cynical at the time and kind of thought I knew how it all worked and I had everything figured out, and I went to a theater that was near my house. I grew up in Oakland, California. We have this theater called the Grand Lake, which is the most beautiful old movie palace. I feel like there's a lot more of those here, but they still show they're theatrical, they show theater, whereas in America we had these really amazing movie palaces that have disappeared and they've either turned into A lot of them are churches, surprisingly, or malls, and this one still exists, and I get to go see the movie there in a couple weeks, and I'm so excited. And it was showing at midnight the night before. My friend was the guy who served the popcorn at the theater, and he called me up and he said, we're going to watch this new movie tonight at midnight. And so I snuck out of my house because I was grounded, and that, I don't know if that's a British term. Do you get grounded? You get grounded.
We've taken a lot from your culture. We now have high school proms,
okay,
which didn't have when I was growing
I'm
up.
sorry about that. So I was grounded from seeing movies. That was the only thing that you could really do to punish me, because it's what I loved most. And so I snuck out of the house, and I did like the cliche of putting the pillows under the blankets so you saw my body there, and I did have a driver's license, so I got in the car and put it in neutral, rolled it down the hill, and I sat in this theater, and it was the first time that I had seen a movie with digital sound, and it was this really cavernous space, and there were only 2 people in the whole theater, and so you know how when you have a lot of bodies in some place, it warms up the sound, it absorbs a lot of it, and so it was empty, and so the sound was just shaking the entire building, and what it did for me at the time was something different than what Star Wars or Back to the Future or Raiders of the Lost Ark had done when I was younger. It showed me how a movie can take you from being a cynical 16-year-old or even an adult and turn you back into a child. And so it was actually very informative for what I was trying to do here, and what I think we've done pretty well, which is make something that is very respectful of Jurassic Park, and yet is a new movie and feels like an original movie set in that world, and has a lot of very subtle ways of making you feel the way that you did when you watched the first one without repeating the incidents or bringing back even all of the characters. And that I wanted to find a way to do that in a different way. I feel like, this is a really long answer.
It's a good answer. I'm going to keep quiet.
Fan service is something that can immediately become very pandering, very quickly, and I didn't even want to consider it fan service because I am a fan. I'm going to naturally do that. It's part of what the mission is, and so to find a way for people like you, who probably went into this, pretty dubious, pretty doubtful that this was going to work on any level, to be able to have an experience that it sounds like you enjoyed in the way that I was hoping you'd enjoy it, and that it also, I feel like it acknowledges that there's no way you're going to feel the same way about this movie that you did about Jurassic Park. It's just not possible.
No, and I think it succeeds in the way that, I really liked Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 when I saw them, but I feel like they tried to move out and progress the series, and I don't think they ever really understood or really worked out, because it was really hard to recapture or work out what the magic of the original was, because it's such a well-balanced and tight movie. Because is it the characters per se? I don't think it really is. I think it's more the dynamics between the characters, because they try to bring back Jeff Goldblum's character, and then for the third one, Sam Neill's character. So it doesn't really adhere itself into the characters per se. It's something about the relationships and what's going on. When you started this project, did you go back to the original and not try to reverse engineer it, but try to work out what defines a Jurassic Park film, really? Because I think Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 kind of muddle what that is to an extent.
Well, I think The Lost World is a different movie because Steven won't make the same movie twice. He just is incapable of doing it. And so he wanted to make a different kind of film. And so they made a Lost World movie, or a King Kong movie, however you want to look at it. What I observed as a fundamental equation of what works in a Jurassic Park movie, and why we have an advantage here because we have that equation, is you enter a place that is full of awe and wonder and joy, and then that spirit is slowly dismantled over the course of an hour and a half, 2 hours. And Jurassic Park 3 and The Lost World both had a different equation, which is you're going to a place that's horribly dangerous, you're probably going to die, and sure enough, that's what happens. So there's not really a surprise in that for the characters. And I think with this, Steven's idea to have a fully functional park, made it very easy to let our imaginations run wild from there. because you have that equation. You get to bring children into this park and see it through their eyes, and we get to be them, and the process of making sure that the park felt real and tactile, that you could touch it and live in it, and that the rides reminded us of rides that we go on now, and that you have that sense of like waiting in endless lines, and the kids are complaining, and it's hot and it's miserable. All of that stuff.
Like the park attendant just doing this like as a summer job, and he's really like just bored of it.
Enjoy the ride, yeah. And the girl, amazing actor who did. When the Mosasaurus comes out, and how casually it was great Derek Connolly writing it, where she's like, well, let's hope she's still hungry after eating earlier today, and it's so mundane. And that stuff I think that's new to this movie, and it's part of what I hope makes it work, is that you're recognizing not just the wish fulfillment of a theme park, but also how how very real and at certain times, boring it can be to go to these places, and then you're like, of course, shocked and horrified.
I just want to rewind slightly. Like, you're talking about what you went about doing once you kind of got the role and the gig. Like how did that happen? Because your first movie, Safety Not Guaranteed, for $750,000 ish, and I think it's on Netflix. It's a really good movie, but it's a small movie. And compared to this, a lot of movies are small compared to this. Like, how does that come about, going from that movie to this? Can you kind of go into that story?
Yeah. So I'd actually just come back from here, where we had released Safety Not Guaranteed, I think, in like 5 theaters. So if you saw it in the theater, then I would be shocked. But it is playing on Netflix here now, which is great. It's not on Netflix in America anymore. It was there for a little while.
I'm sure they can find a way.
I'm sure they can find it.
Netflix finds a way.
It's great that people get to discover it, because I'm very proud of it, and it's one of those films that you look back on filmmakers that become very familiar over time, and I hope that I have a career, of longevity that a lot of the people that I admire, and you look back at their first film and they're sloppy and they're messy, and yet you see very clearly a voice in there that evolves over time, and all of those filmmakers had an advantage that I didn't have, which is that Peter Jackson got to make Dead Alive, and he got to make Heavenly Creatures, and he built Frighteners, all these movies before he did Lord of the Rings. And I don't know if you'd had him go from, this isn't even my Dead Alive, this is the one with the puppets. Whatever. What's the one with the puppets? Remember, they're all like crazy, like sex crazed puppets. No, I can't remember. Yeah, something like that. So I guess this is that, and the first thing I said to Steven when he called me into the room to discuss it, and it was like that. I definitely wasn't seeking out a big movie. The next movie I was gonna do is actually the movie I'm probably gonna get to do next. Very small, under $10 million story.
You met Steven before that point?
No.
What's it like when you find that you've got to go effectively kind of have a job interview with Steven Spielberg?
It was intense. It was for real. And I live in Vermont. I live in the East Coast of the United States, where it is very, very cold in the winter. And it was February of 2013. It was like late February. And I remember actually sitting on my chair in my office, and I look out onto this, all of this snow, and it was snowing outside, and we got this call, and it was Frank Marshall, and Frank and I talked about it for a while, and it went very well, and I had been told, like, you're pretty much one of one, like this is the choice, and they're going to bring you in and make sure you're not crazy. And that's what it is.
I'm going to have to suppress it.
Yeah, like there wasn't, I know that they'd been talking to various people for about a year, but by the time it got to me, it was the decision, barring me completely fucking up, which makes it even more stressful. They're like, you got this until you don't. And so I flew out, and we sat down, and one of the very first things I said to him was, look, if this fails, then you continue on to be a legend of cinema, and I am finished. Like, I will disappear. And he had, and I said all of this to him, he had the privilege of being able to make a long series of original films, Sugarland Express and Duel, and then Jaws, and he built, and even from there, built up to something the size of this. I mean, this is a massive, massive undertaking, and I felt like, in a certain way, I was being robbed of that. I was being robbed of, and that sounds like a negative, but robbed of that right of a filmmaker to make a bunch of mistakes and learn from those mistakes. And
it's getting it really soon in your career, that big film, which a lot of people get, like you say, fourth, fifth film in.
Right, and that's how it should be.
Yeah,
that's how it should be, and it's designed that way for a reason. And we have an interesting trend right now where this is happening, and I think it's probably the result of two things. One is that I think Mark Webb showed that it can work. He made very, very competent and entertaining Spider-Man movies, and I think all he had to do was show that it isn't a massive disaster, which it wasn't, for studios to say, oh, well, this makes a lot of sense. And I think there's, I don't know what level of control the other studios have over these younger filmmakers. There's this assumption that I was hired because I am easily controlled and manipulated by some kind of all powerful corporation. Not the reality at all. I mean, we are
to the movie.
Yeah, but I mean, we're this is my director's cut that we're seeing in a couple of weeks, and the studio was supportive, the whole time, and I didn't have them on set over my shoulder, and I wasn't getting notes. I had Steven, and that was a massive privilege. But back to the conversation, it was something that I knew I was going to do. I wasn't going to say no, and I never told them that I was going to say no until I read the script. And then I had to go back in, and I was like, you guys, if I don't understand this movie, and if I direct it, it's going to be a bad movie, because I can't do it.
So what state was it in? Because obviously it's 14 years, well, this year it's 14 years since Jurassic Park 3, and it's one of those movies that, even though it's been in development, we know a lot about it, because again, I think it taps into the fact that even though it's not been one for a while, people are really interested in the series because probably a strong emotional attachment to the original. We know a lot about kind of the various iterations, the John Sayles script, and Joe Johnston saying he's not directing, Sam Neill saying he's coming back, he's not coming back, same with Richard Attenborough. What was the kind of situation it was in when you came on board?
I read Rick Joffe and Amanda Silver's script once. I read it. It was funny. They brought me in, and there was a whole production office that was up and going, and they were ready. We were shooting in 3 or 4 months, and they slid the script across the table. I'd already been hired, and I hadn't read it yet, and they were like, check this out, and then come in tomorrow morning. And I read it, and I certainly don't want to make it any kind of negative about them as writers, just as I would never insult William Monahan, Oscar winner, or John Sayles, incredible independent filmmaker. It just wasn't anything that I knew how to do, and it actually it helped define for me that I really do have a clear voice, and I do have a way that I want to make films, and I can't just be plugged in to anything. As a director for hire, I probably won't be that good, and so I had to go back in and say, look, Derek and I can take these 3 fundamental ideas that were Steven's, which were an open functional park, awesome idea. This idea, raptors not necessarily running through the jungle like that on a motorcycle, but a character who has a relationship with raptors that is somewhat similar to guys who stick their heads in the mouths of lions and are trying to train and communicate with them, and the idea, and this guy, this girl actually, that there would be a dinosaur that was bigger and badder than anything before, and that would escape and threaten everyone in the park. In that particular script, this dinosaur claimed that it was a real dinosaur that was found. It was found in China, and that I actually had a big problem with right away, because I didn't want to make up a new dinosaur and tell kids it's real. Because all of these movies have been based, for better or for worse, in real paleontology. These were all real dinosaurs, even if Yeah, even if many of them look different than we know they would, and so that was one of the first things that I said is no, we have to at least say this is a genetically created hybrid of something if we're going to make up something new, and so there was this weird period of time where because there was a whole production office, because we were moving forward, I went a little rogue and I said, look, Stephen, Derek and I, if you can just put us in a hotel, we're going to go write a new movie that can also be called Jurassic Park 4, and we'll do it very quickly, and if you like that movie, then I would be happy to make that. And it's been, I saw it reported that I said, like, I'm not going to do it, and that makes it sound very arrogant. It was more like, let me show you what I can do, and then what I'll feel good doing. And so in 3 weeks, we wrote this movie. Started completely from scratch, but held on to those ideas, and also held on to, what was also already there was the gyrosphere idea, and that little moment, the gyrosphere getting in between this girl and the Ankylosaurus. It was a different dinosaur at the time, but I love the Ankylosaurus, and I thought that would be a cool thing to use. But the characters, Claire and all of this, Vincent D'Onofrio's character, that storyline, we wrote something that we felt could very much be ours, and we brought it back in, and Stephen read it, and I remember he placed his hand on it, and he was like, "This is Jurassic Park 4." I was like, all right. That was like the one day where we were just, we felt good. You don't have a lot of days where you get to, be the kid in the commercial that runs out and jumps up in the air and it frees frames.
Steven Spielberg says he's okay with your script, that's kind of one of those days.
It was one of those days.
Quite a good day.
It was a good day. And let me be clear, he was down, just because it was a complete, reinvention of it, he was down with the reinvention. We still worked on that stack of paper for 6 months with him. And it's, I haven't gone back and read our original draft. It's very, very similar, but the last 10 to 15% of something is really all of it, and just taking it and making it for something to work on all of the levels of comedy, horror, thriller, adventure, romance, everything that this is. It needs that amount of time, and that was why we postponed the movie, is that we handed this into the studio and they saw what we wanted to do, and they realized that we were shooting in 3 months, and by the time we actually shut it down, it was 1 month. It was crazy. It was just crazy, but I wasn't the one who could stop it. Stephen was the only one who could stop it, and luckily he has that power, and he did, and the studio supported it, and it allowed us to take the script we had, which was, I think that was May of 2013. We worked all summer with Stephen. We had those transcribed story conversations. I'm sure you've read the one with him and Kasdan and George, and so I remember that was another one of those days where I got one of those where they sent me the transcription. It said SS : in his paragraph CT DC, and that was awesome. That was I was like, I have a transcript. That was very cool.
And talk about the two of the kind of most prominent things about the first couple of trailers were that shot of him riding with the raptors, and kind of from the trailer it looked like he was kind of just working with them in the pen, and then obviously the genetically spliced dinosaur.
Right.
And I think for some people, they obviously, because they're big, bold ideas, found them quite controversial or new, and kind of were unsure about them. Were you kind of worried about those initial trailers? Because I think particularly the raptor stuff, I think it plays much better in the context of the film. It seems less kind of bizarre than in the trailer. Yeah,
believe me, there really is a very natural bit of conflict between a filmmaker wanting an audience to be brought slowly into a film and to be eased into accepting an image like that.
Yeah.
And so if in the first trailer suddenly you've got that is bananas.
That's the thing. When it happens and they go out of the gates and suddenly it looks like they're in perfect harmony,
you're like, of course.
What?
Yeah.
It's very easy to reject it. Whereas, like I say, without going into spoilers, it plays much better in the film.
Well, because you know why it's happening.
Yeah.
You have built up to a point where you've accepted a lot of other things. Your suspension of disbelief has to be earned, and we've been earning it by the time that happens for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And I think that especially if you're introducing a new, every movie has its own logic, and if you're introducing a new set of rules to just show people snippets of something without them understanding the set of rules that define the movie is can be challenging for an audience. People think this is just going to be the same thing again. They don't, Jurassic Park 3 didn't do the kind of numbers that this movie needs to do for us to spend the amount of money we're spending. And we need to show people, they've seen the movie. They know this is different and this is bold, and we want to show people that they're going to have a completely different kind of experience, so we're going to show them this. And I think, my opinion, I think they have shown far more of this movie than I would ever have wanted. I was emailing the guys today, and I was like, "Can I just have the credits? Can you not spoil the credits at the end? Like, at least give me that."
It's likewise. I think the last trailer, was the most kind of bombastic trailer. It was the most action-oriented trailer. Right. It has the shot in the aviary of stuff exploding. Yeah, and I think that left me as a fan of the original, it's like, oh my god, I don't want it to be a shoot 'em up. Yeah. And I probably didn't say this strong enough at the beginning. Like, what I loved about the movie and really, really enjoyed it is it isn't that at all. It isn't at all, because the trailers are kind of acts of deception, or you're trying to tease out certain elements and to get certain people in through the door, and it kind of makes it into this big action movie, which is not really at all. There's very few kind of explosions in it whatsoever. Right. And what I love about the original movie, there's lots of character moments, there's lots of tender moments, lots of funny moments, which don't really get anywhere near the trailers. There's lots of characters in the wilderness, very much like the original, kind of having little character arcs, like Sam Neill in the original movie, like the reluctant parent accepts that responsibility. Mm-hmm. There's stuff like that going on for several of the characters in the movie. Yeah.
I think for me, the way that I was able to unpack it was, this kind of marketing has, they're able to put the numbers in front of you, has historically been able to get a lot of people into the theater to see the movie. And I trust that a lot of people seeing the movie will allow a lot of people to call their friends and be like, actually, it's not like that at all. It feels much more like Jurassic Park than we ever thought it would, even though those things are in the movie. And also, Jurassic Park is not a genre film. What genre would you put it in? As a fan, I'm actually curious, what genre would you say? I
always think of it as, it is that classic kind of mad scientist meets disaster movie, I think. It's kind of, it straddles a couple things, I think.
But a genre is action, thriller.
Oh, we kind of,
so this is a comedy, action, horror, thriller, romantic adventure. I mean, it's everything. Yeah. And so to put all of that into a trailer, especially the kinds of emotional arcs that we have in this movie, are very difficult to do. It does its own thing, and I saw it happen. Even with the clip that they showed, which I never thought they should have done, but they showed that clip of Claire and Owen talking, and in the context of the movie, it just kind of flows right by, and it's part of the tone. Yeah, but when you
fill it out of the movie, and obviously that caused a bit of furore. Like obviously the Whedon thing. Like, how did you react to that? Like,
I didn't. I wasn't surprised.
That thing because you with a lot of them? Because I remember when the original trailer came out, and it has that head-on shot going into the gates, and
well, let's talk about that first,
because you replied to that saying that shot's not even in the movie.
No, it's not, and that was something that marketing felt very strongly that they needed to be able to see the park on the other side of the gates and have a very trailery kind of shot. And that was one of our first big conflicts. We built a gate. And we shot the jungle, and we this thing was all real that we done. And you saw the shot in the movie, and it's there. It's real. It's also it's a composed image. Like it looks good, and it's not this really flat kind of thing. And so they created this entirely CG shot, which I knew anytime a real fan saw that, it was going to send this subconscious message right away of this is all going to be fake and shitty. And it did. And I told them, but they would say back to me, of course, you know what? All those people are going to go no matter what. And you can argue that that's cynical, but you can also argue that it's true.
I think it's kind of true.
It's also true.
It is true. I understand, as much as you disagree or rail against it, you understand why these decisions are made, because people like me are going to go. It's the people who don't care about Jurassic Park. Right. So what was the internal thinking about Jurassic Park? Because it's very hard for me to get an objective perspective, but where was its kind of, I don't know, its cultural value?
Until
internally, what was the perception of it as a series? It's been away for 14 years.
They obviously see it as one of the most recognizable and successful franchises in the history of cinema, which it is, and yet one that had diminishing returns financially for the studio, and arguably creatively. And they felt that well, honestly, like what they felt is we want another Jurassic Park movie, period. And that's why so many different iterations were attempted, and that's why a version that no one liked was heading into production because they wanted another Jurassic Park movie. And what was funny about that moment in time was we get in there and they're like, well, we're hoping that, they hired me as the indie character guy who was going to come in and Colin will make sure that the characters are believable.
Yeah, you have some funny lines and nice moments.
Yeah, and we do that too, but that's not enough. That's not enough. And I was like, no, like we have to build the whole thing. But where we started was, well, here is a giant corporation, Comcast, Universal, who is going to do something again, resurrect an idea that probably shouldn't be resurrected because it's just obviously something that has a high rate of failure, and they're going to do it anyway. Why? Because they can make shit tons of money. And why don't we just make a movie about that? Because that's what Jurassic World is.
Basically, the language you're using, we want to resurrect a thing, and there's loads of dialogue in the movie that you can read that way. I'm sure it's intentional. And it's, of course, it's there. But all those things like it needs more teeth, the wow factor, people get tired, and obviously that's a comment on blockbuster culture in general. Every summer getting bigger, and you see that every studio now. You see it in some of the emails that have got out there. Like people want not just sequels. Like there's a line in Scream where at the end he says, "It's all about the sequel these days." Right. But these days it's all about having like a universe, like a shared universe. Right. It's like how many things can you cross over and put together? Sure. Like what's good about the original Jurassic Park, and I think maybe this is why it doesn't naturally lead into a sequel, is it's pretty well contained. You end in a situation where there's no reason to go back there.
No, it's a singular experience.
It's a singular experience. And I feel like to some extent this kind of plays like a singular experience.
It was designed that way. Yeah.
But obviously that's at kind of at odds with what everyone maybe like in the studio wants to happen with it as a franchise.
I think what they wanted the most was to have it be identified as a franchise again. Okay. That was the top priority. Is can you take this and bring it back into the forefront of people's minds when they think of what are the big franchises that are out there right now. They're going to say, Avengers, Star Wars, and then Jurassic Park is in that arena. Yeah. Tall order. Yeah. But and I knew the only way to do it was to create a singular experience that worked on its own, that would give people that same feeling. But all this stuff we're talking about, that was just me and Derek writing a movie about what was going on in our lives at the moment of okay, well, they want something. They had a bunch of focus groups, and they said, well, what would make you tell your friend to go see a Jurassic Park movie? And so why don't we just replace the movie with a dinosaur that is a hybrid of all? I mean, it's very obvious once you start breaking it down, and hopefully it's not too on the nose, but it wouldn't be to anyone who's outside of like the room Derek and I were in writing. But they say write what you know, and that's certainly what we were doing. And even in the context of the characters.
I was going to say, but it also feels like, to continue that reading, it feels like the older sensibility kind of wins out at the end of the day, that you're not universe building, you make a singular experience, and you bring in like a very classic character at the end. I'm going to go into spoilers here, right, but I will save this for later. But, T-Rex, again, saves the day.
Yes, and that was, well, there's a moment in the movie where D'Onofrio and Pratt are talking, and they're talking through this fence, and I wrote this little exchange, which to me was it was the dynamic that existed at the time, which D'Onofrio says, "Progress always wins, man," and he goes, well, maybe progress should lose for once, and I feel like that's the movie. Yeah. Is that in the end, we don't destroy a city. We don't. It is just a couple people and a couple dinosaurs, and the stakes are all about what happens to that group. And I think in this scenario, progress lost in this movie, and we kind of went back. And the great thing is that they're going to win. They're going to make all of their money, and I want them to. Yeah. I really do, and I feel like talking about it like this suggests that there was some kind of, there wasn't a bad relationship with the studio in this scenario. I have been spoiled with a relationship that, even though we were having these debates, was always toward a shared goal, and I never had anything forced on me. And the fact that I get to say the kind of like anti-corporate
You've
rhetoric,
been really honest about it, yeah.
yeah,
like,
that's in the movie. I don't even mean just hear you and me, but you have Jake Johnson going off at the beginning of this movie about how corporations ruin everything, and we should call it, Pepsi Storis and Tostito Don. That kind of language in a movie financed by Comcast. I think that illustrates that they really let me, do something that I believed in, that was saying something that I wanted to say, which is pretty brave of them.
If you look elsewhere what people are doing, particularly the Marvel movies, which I really enjoy, I'm a big comic book fan, and I like what they're doing, but it's almost like adopting like a TV model on the big screen where it's all about the next episode. There's not a singular experience, and I think that's even more pronounced with like Captain America 3 is pretty much going to feel like the next Avengers movie, or it's Marvel 12.
Right.
Because there's so many of the same characters, the same narratives kind of being furthered on a little bit. Whereas this is, like you say, a relatively singular experience.
Yeah, but it's the way the tide is.
But what's the future for Jurassic World? I know you're calling it specific. Do you want to be a part of that?
I don't know. I think I'll be a part of it in some way, just because Frank and Stephen and I all share a desire for this story to get told around the campfire long after all of us are gone. And I think that Amblin movies have that right. They've earned that right. They are as valuable, I think, as fairy tales and myths and
fables. It's really nice to see that logo at the beginning of the movie.
Wasn't that great?
Yeah.
That was. I'm very proud of that. I'm very, very proud of that. But that is the result of something. It's a result of a conversation that has been going on for 2 years, and it's not, it is Stephen and Frank's company, but I think it was helpful for someone who grew up on Amblin movies to come in and say, why does Pixar and Marvel and Lucasfilm, why do all these brands get to be brands that identify a very certain kind of experience that you're going to get, that you know and love? Why isn't Amblin one of those brands? Yeah. It's every bit as valuable, and it's every bit as much of a guarantee that you're going to get something that you love and care about. So yeah, let's have a new Amblin logo. Let's make this an Amblin movie, and let's make more Amblin movies. Because
obviously that signifies something to me growing up. And I think recently, segue to, because I was going to talk to you about a few other things, but Super 8 tried to do that a few years ago. What was that, 4 or 5 years ago? Tried to recapture some kind of that feeling quite directly, not trying to modernise it, but trying to tap into that nostalgia. And obviously JJ now working on Star Wars, and you said earlier Star Wars was your Star Wars, and you were kind of like the rumour mill or stuff that's out there, you were kind of connected with that early on. Was that true?
It was only true.
Kind of tangential.
It was, and although I remember that very clearly because I was informed of that rumor along with everybody else. It turned out to be true, but I didn't know that it was true at the time, and so I'm just like sitting on my couch in Vermont, and Isabel, my wife, is like, so apparently, like, you're being considered to direct Star Wars episodes, and I got like really emotional. I was like, no, you don't say that. You can't just say that. What are you talking about? That came from, and I think it's been reported. I actually never really wanted to talk about it because it seems like those things should always be kept behind the scenes. But it came out of a conversation that Brad Bird, who has been a friend and a mentor to me ever since Safety Not Guaranteed, that he was having with them about Episode 7 when they were talking to different directors, and he came up with this pretty cockamamie idea that who uses that word, but that's the only word that I can apply. That he really wanted to do Tomorrowland. He really wanted to do an original movie, and I understand that need, and I have it now. And I'm going to make some pretty interesting choices after this. As far as what I do, I don't think it's going to be on the scale of what Tomorrowland was, but I really do feel that it's important for filmmakers who love these kinds of movies, and I don't consider it like one for me, one for them. Like it's a big one for me and a small one for me. But he wanted to do an original movie, and based on their schedule at the time, he wasn't going to be able to do both. But what he put forward was, well, what if Colin Trevorrow comes in and preps this movie for me while I'm finishing Tomorrowland, and then I'll come in and direct it, and then I can oversee Colin, and he can do 8, and this can be. And I had no idea that conversation was going on, and of course, their response was, "Who the fuck is Colin Trevorrow? What are you talking about?" And so none of them had like, "What are you talking about?" But what he did do was introduce them to my film and to me, and as a result of that, Stephen saw the film and Kathy saw it and Frank saw it, and it just got transferred over to what about Colin for Jurassic Park?
Yeah. So, 9's open. The director's here, 9's open.
9 is available.
But there's also these anthology movies which I'm really interested about, and Josh Trank originally just dropped off the second one,
right? And
they're kind of filling in gaps in the Star Wars timeline, doing kind of spin-off
stories.
Do you find those more intriguing in a way?
I'm maybe because I'm a Star Wars kid. Like the Luke Skywalker storyline is something that's very personal to me. So I'm a little more interested in those as a viewer. This is all as a viewer.
Yeah.
The spin-offs, of course, I'm going to go see, and I'm excited about it as well. And I haven't heard a lot about what they're doing with them, but in just seeing knowing John Knoll and working with him on this, and because he's executive producing Rogue One, and seeing the kinds of stories that they're doing, it's exciting to me because it's different than, I think, from a universe building standpoint than what Marvel is doing. Those characters and stories have all been, they're all pretty familiar for 60 years plus to a lot of people, whereas these movies are able to look at a massive universe and go into it's sort of like having a giant Grand Theft Auto place, and you get a new little area that opens up and you get to go. And I am very excited to see those. The Boba Fett one particularly, I'm interested to see how they do that. That's not one that I would be interested in personally, just because Boba Fett, I don't know what his character is.
It's that's the thing. That's one. He's an enduringly enigmatic figure, and it's almost like you want to do that because he's popular. The first time you see him in the Christmas special, he comes in riding a purple dinosaur, which is pretty cool. But then if you do a whole movie, do you kind of eliminate some of that mystique? But
I don't know. I think they'll. What's cool is that you get to. They'll get to build their own new set of rules for that movie, and I have. If what that does is let us see into. I'm sure there's a pretty cool dark underworld of the Star Wars universe that I've seen in some of the games. That I know people would love to see, and I imagine that any bounty hunter is gonna exist somewhere in that universe. Just from the little things. Again, I know nothing. It's me as a fan, but he represents a window, a doorway into another part of the universe.
The underbelly. See, what's talked about maybe doing like a series that kind of like Sopranos type. Kind of gangster series. I think that was one of the rumours, and the cancelled Star Wars game 1313 was going to be set on like the seedy underbelly of Coruscant, I think.
That sounds
Do you play
cool
video
too.
Games?
I used to a lot more before I had kids.
Okay.
Yeah, before I had kids, I played a lot. I don't get to as much anymore. But I've got my Xbox One and I love it, and I saw this crazy looking dinosaur riding game. Did you see that?
Yeah, like the MMO. I can't remember its name. We ran the trailer the other day where it's like
looks. I mean, it's funny because like that is the very thing that I think everybody is, fears that our series is going to turn into, but then I'm sure a lot of people saw it and went, that's kind of cool.
Still want to do it.
Like I would play that in a heartbeat.
Do you have a favorite video game?
My favorite video games are weird ones, just because they're as with all of us, as with movies, they're connected to times in our lives. I loved Escape from Butcher Bay when that came out. Red Dead Redemption, that was the bigger one.
That's one of my great games of all time. Like the endings,
it's incredible. Like the one that I love that very few people ever played. It's on the original Xbox. There was this game called Circus Maximus that was like a chariot racing game, multiplayer chariot racing game, and it's just that it's one of those like a time and a place games where right when I first moved to Los Angeles, I was living with a couple guys in a house, and we got our first Xbox, and we were playing this this game where one guy is driving the chariot and the other guy's on a back like with a battle axe like hacking at other people. It's incredible. It's like the most exhilarating video game I've ever played, and I'm so frustrated. Xbox, if you're listening, please like make an Xbox One version of Circus Maximus.
There you go. I'll let them know at E3 in a couple of weeks.
Let them know.
Cool. Just to finish, I'm interviewing Chris Pratt and Dallas Bryce Howard this afternoon. Is there anything I should ask Chris, and is there anything I should ask Bryce?
Oh God, I feel like what's fun about both of them is they, and with everybody involved in this movie, is everyone has their own personal relationship with with Jurassic Park. It's got all these movies, Star Wars. They're like a religion for people, and everyone has you have a personal relationship with Jesus, and only you know it. Like people have a personal relationship with Star Wars, and those two have a very personal relationship with Jurassic Park, and getting. I think that will be a fascinating podcast in its own right, because it'll be three of you who are all from the same generation, and their spirit on set was one that really energized all of us and drove us, because it was like having two 12-year-olds who were wearing these costumes and like dressing up in dad's clothes and suddenly realizing.
I saw a clip of Chris Pratt running in and he's just like, you don't know how much fun this is.
Yeah.
His outfit is a little bit Muldoon-esque, and a bit Alan Grant, and
to me it was like an old an old 30s adventure. You can
high
go
adventure,
like it's a high adventure, exactly.
Yeah.
That was the look, and all of those costumes are pulled from that 30s high adventure look. It's like how Indiana Jones looks exactly like the guy in there's like posters of guys from the 30s. Like, wait a minute, it's Indiana Jones.
There's no wonder this room is about Chris Pratt.
Right, yeah, it looks very similar. And her thing was, I wanted her to be all in white. She is the.
Was that
lead.
a John Hammond reference, or was it?
It wasn't else? Like people say that it wasn't. It was that I brought a picture of like a white egret to our costume designer, and then another picture of a white egret like covered in an oil spill, and I was like, this is what I want to have happen to her over the course of this movie. And I also think her character, she's the lead. I mean, from a narrative standpoint, she's the lead of the movie, and she's the one who really changes. He's a little bit more like Indy, where he's kind of the same guy at the beginning as he is at the end, and the transformation that she goes through, and the fact that she does it in a dress and she does it in heels, and it's, to me, that's a very a little bit of Romancing the Stone in it too, it was very important to us that she go through this adventure in what she wore that day, and that she is, she's a woman on an adventure who's just dealing with it as it goes down, and without any kind of spoiler, like what she does at the end of this movie is something I'm very, very proud of, and I think I
was getting quite emotional.
I think the fan that's the moment when. I assume that we'll hopefully, if you're a fan, we'll have you at that point, and that's when we're all together and we just get to live in it and go back in time as a group and be happy.
Wicked. I think we're gonna have to stop. I think we're done for time.
Cool.
Just one question for myself. When they're running through the visitor centre at the end, and he activates the hologram of the Dilophosaurus. Is that original footage from the movie, or is it not?
It is. Like it's basically they took the original footage and they were able to like make a 3D.
Yeah, I thought it was. So I wasn't sure. It's so fleeting. I was like, it'd be cool if that is an Easter egg. No, it is technically a CG version of it, but it is the original. Yeah. Cool. Okay, well, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it.
You should listen to the GamesIndustry.biz microcast.
More people are playing games than ever before. They've never been more popular, and yet the business behind it is facing some real challenges and changes.
There's been tens of thousands of layoffs, hundreds of studio closures as major companies face rising costs and falling sales.
There's uncertainty around the future of game consoles.
There's legal and government intervention into how games are even being paid for.
The role of AI is changing how games are being made.
There's the impact of games like Fortnite and Roblox dominating everyone's time.
And then there's the desperate wait for Switch 2 and GTA 6, and that's just 2024.
Two leading business journalists with a combined 35 years of experience offer you a weekly guide through all of this and more.
I'm Christopher Dring, head of GamesIndustry.biz.
I'm James Batchelor, editor-in-chief of GamesIndustry.biz, and you can join us every Monday for the GamesIndustry.biz microcast.
The most important stories,
expert guests,
exclusive market data,
and all in less than 30 minutes.
Usually.
The GamesIndustry.biz microcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Ladies and gentlemen.
What are you doing?
What do you mean?
Just keep it simple.
I'm making the promo.
Just keep it simple. Just say, hey, we're the Brav Bros. Two guys that talk about Bravo.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're the Brav Bros.
No.
Oh.
Dude, stop with the voice. Just keep it simple.
I've seen promos on TV, dude. This is how you get the fans engaged. This is how you get listeners. We're trying to get listeners here. If we just say, oh, we're two dudes that talk about Bravo, people are going to get tired of it already. We need some oomph.
All right, then fine. Let's try to do it with your voice.
Brav Bros.
Good job.